You're listening to Arsenal Pass, a flesh and blood podcast for players by players. And all about strategy, leveling up, and the latest news in the world of Wraith. Welcome to Arsenal Pass.
Welcome back, everyone, to episode 19 of Arsenal Pass. I'm Brendan Patrick, joined always by calling champion Hayden Dale. Hayden, how are you doing?
Good, Brendan. How are you?
I'm really good, man. I've been waiting for this episode pretty much since we started. So this is our kind of official mailbag episode. An episode consisted entirely of questions submitted by you, the listeners. We had over 90 questions, which is just incredible to think. And yeah, I'm excited. I've wanted to kind of do one of these, not totally free form, but more free form, question oriented podcasts and just switch it up. And I'm super happy with the turnout.
Yep, I'm excited for it too. I think it's going to be really cool. There's some really awesome questions that have come in.
Awesome. Well, Hayden, as always, get me started off with your week in Flesh and Blood.
Yeah, my week in Flesh and Blood looked very similar to my last few weeks in Flesh and Blood. Just quite a bit of testing. I did play 2 armories last week instead of my usual customary 1 armory. So I played a couple of blitz armories, which is nice. And then just testing, another someone on the opposite side of the mic to me, I guess virtually, had another event. And I think maybe you should talk about that event that we were sort of, I guess, doing some last minute prep for.
Yep. So on Saturday, I drove up to Edmond, Oklahoma, which is about 3 hours north of me. And there was a 52-player Road to Nationals event at a store called Edmond Unplugged. Quick shout out to that store because it is actually the coolest game store that I've ever been to in my entire life. It's also a bar, and they serve food as well. But the kind of layout of the store was very like lounge-esque. The entire like wall, it was a very, very big store, by the way, was just like one long couch. And there was so much room, and it was an awesome experience. I've just never been to anything like that. Like I've been to kind of these like pseudo card stores / bars, but this was very much like a card and gaming store that had like a full service kind of food and drink with it and like lounge kind of feel. So that was awesome. And obviously the event was fantastic. I was super happy to kind of get back out there and redeem my loss. I got 10th on Bravo the week before. So brought the Shane up this weekend. I was able to take first. I actually kind of got into top 8 on my skinny chin. Barely got. I don't even know. I had to be like a 5%er, just totally random. I think my opponents did really well. My opponents from Swiss, because I was almost certain that I was 9th or 10th, and I squeaked in at top 8, ran the gauntlet, and took home the win, which was good. It felt nice. It felt good to get another win. So currently 100% win ratio on the chain that I bring, the chain that we brought to the Road to Nationals. But yeah, it's a good deck and really, really good experience. I know I don't want to go too deep into it on this episode, but I do want to shout out some people that I met there. One kind of notable experience was a guy named Zach Bunn. I think that I don't know if they co-own it or whatever, but he is the CEO of Team Covenant. But I met him the weekend before, and I met him again at that event, as well as his brother Tim. And I mean, just huge shout out to that guy. It's just such a good personality in the game. The guy is extremely humble, all about competing, just has like a very, kind of pure competitive spirit, is there to win, and win in like, an awesome way, win fair games and just have a good time, but focus on being competitive. And I think that's just a really, like, to me, and it just brings a little bit of warmth to my heart to see people out there that are content creators that are, successful, and they come out and they, there's no ego, and they're 100% focused on being the best that they possibly can. And I think that's awesome for the game. Like there's, leads to better content and just, growing the community in organic ways. So, I mean, that was honestly like one of my favorite experiences was meeting him and his brother as well. His brother wins 6-0 in Swiss. Ooh. And I played him in the quarters. Both Zach and his brother Tim lost in the quarters, unfortunately, so just barely missing out on that top 4. But I was just really impressed by their demeanor and the way to play. And a lot of the other people that, it's Oklahoma, so I knew a lot of these people, just general people in the South, a lot of people from Online Skirmish. It was awesome to kind of meet them in person. Just a great event. So I had a really good time. And if you, this is going to sound funny, but Edmond, Oklahoma like I've been to Oklahoma, I've been to OU, the university. My brother actually goes there, and I wasn't like too impressed. But Edmond, Oklahoma, is probably like one of the coolest towns in the South. Like it reminded me of like Austin, Texas. It's just like this cute little town, like all these really nice restaurants and shops, and there was obviously the card shop. And yeah, it was awesome. I just totally wasn't expecting it, and had a way better experience than I had planned to have going in.
That's so cool. Yeah, I love those kind of things. It's awesome hearing about Zach and his brother doing well. And Team Covenant is such I love what those guys do. I tune into some of their streams once in a while, and I think their passion for games and trying to build communities is pretty wicked. So it's really cool to hear, and good that you had such a nice experience over the weekend. I think that's one of the most important things about going to these events and traveling is you want to be having good experiences. So yeah, and
Yeah.
of course, congratulations.
Yeah, I mean, it was. Zach beat me in Swiss. I think that him doing so well in Swiss is why I got in the top 8 by some who knows what breaker. But yeah, and on Bravo as well. So a matchup that I probably haven't lost in like a few months, even in testing. Played a gentleman's game of Bravo. Tit for tat, mid range kind of race. I think that he had ruled out that the fatigue was not the way to go. And we played a gentleman's game of Flesh and Blood, and I came out the loser, but happily was able to kind of run the gauntlet in top 8 and get back my glory. But yeah, really impressed, and just great event. Huge shout out to all my opponents, awesome guys up there in Oklahoma. I think the Kadachi for 3 podcasts, I think all of them are located up there, so it was awesome meeting them as well. But yeah, as you can tell, I had a pretty good weekend.
yeah. I mean, you won at the end of the day, so you can't be too sad about it.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's like it's more about the experience at this point. I've won Road to Nationals, I got my invite. So the fact that I get to go to a tournament, experience like a high competitive level and meet a bunch of cool people and meet all these people that I've known about or have met online and finally meet them in person is, to be honest, it's phenomenal. And everybody who comes up to me and, says nice things about the podcast, I can't really put into words how much that means to me and both Hayden, who I relay it back to. So really appreciate the good feedback, especially in person. It's been awesome. But Hayden, enough about my event. I've been rambling a bit. Take us into the news. Got some exciting stuff this week.
Yeah, definitely. So on fabtcg.com this week, they did put up all the the locations for the Tales of Aria pre-release. So that's happening the weekend of the 17th September, which is coming around really quickly. So that's super exciting. If you want to try and find a location close to you, if you haven't seen it, I guess on Facebook or wherever you might search for your events, you can just go to fabtcg.com, use the locator, and find a pre-release near you. It looks like, way more pre-releases this time around than we had with Monarch, with limited products. So yeah, I think just super exciting. That looks like anyone who wants to play a pre-release is probably going to be able to play a pre-release, local circumstances allowing. Wanted to shout out as well. I got a little wee package in the mail this week, Brendan, from Legend Story Studios. People might have already seen these floating around on the internet, on Twitter and Facebook and Discord and whatnot. But LSS did send out, what they're calling like a content creator pack to, basically a bunch of content creators, funnily enough, which has some really cool promos in it. There's these like, what are they called? Like full art foil hero protections.
Full art. Yeah. Sorry, they're extended art heralds. Herald of Protection, the entire pitch kind of pitch cycle, and then you got a few playmats as well, right?
Our playmat, yeah. There's a Hero of Protection playmat as well. So we're gonna be giving those away, of course, to our listeners and viewers. I think we'll talk about that on Time in the Round this week. So if you want to jump in and get on some of these promos, be in to win, then check out Time in the Round this week. We'll talk about how to get your hands on some of those. But yeah, very exciting. And as I said, Tales of Aria coming up very soon. Spoiler season or preview season starts in just 2 weeks. And of course, Brendan, we have a really exciting spoiler. Well, actually, I haven't seen it yet, but I'm assuming it's an exciting spoiler. Ours is going to be on the 3rd, September the 3rd is our preview. So we'll be putting that up. I think that's in New Zealand time, I'm pretty sure. So September the 3rd, which would be 2nd in the US.
It depends how important the spoiler is. Usually the more important it is, the more narrow the time frame is. So hopefully we get one with a super narrow time frame and we can give you the exact time. But
they've given it to me, Brendan, so it's going to be important.
True. It is Sleep Dart. It is Sleep Dart 2.0. they wanted to get back at us for us dogging on Ranger on the podcast. But yeah, we'll see. It actually, like, I'm not even kidding. It does look like it's going to be a Ranger, a Ranger spoiler or a generic, which I'm all for. Like, don't get me wrong. I love me some Ranger. Like I say, I've said it a million times. It's the hardest deck in Flesh and Blood. Nobody can tell me otherwise.
Well, I might have another one for you.
I'm sure.
Anyway, so we've got a spoiler. Of course, we'll work out how we'll either just do it in one of our episodes if it fits in time-wise. Otherwise, we'll definitely pop a video and share that. And I'm super excited to see what the set has to bring. We'll be on, I guess, September 3rd, day 3, right? Because our spoiler start on September the 1st. So yeah, look, I can't wait to see what Tales of Aria has in store for us. But anyway, Brendan, moving on. Last week we talked about our Patreon that we are launching. And, as of this episode going up, our Patreon has launched. So you can go to patreon.com/Arsenal Pass. And you can see our Patreon there. So really excited that you've had this in the works for a while and we're launching it now. If you are looking to, I guess, get access to additional content, we've got an extra monthly podcast that goes up on our Patreon. The first one that'll be coming next week. We've got deck guides as well. So, a place that we can upload a bit more in-depth deck guides that works in a format for us, I think, which is really cool. Brennan's Bravo deck guides going to be up there very soon on our Patreon. Plus, you can go and see all the tiers that are on there. But yeah, just really excited that there's a way for us to, I guess, what we're doing on the Arsenal Pass channel with the podcast and with YouTube is something that we want to stay committed to. But this allows us to put out some of that other content that's not digital. It's a bit more old school. So yeah.
Yeah, it's all about kind of getting into the nitty gritty, right? I know we do kind of do these class deep dives, but we always stay like pretty high level. We don't talk about all the little intricacies in every single matchup and every single sideboard guide and all this kind of stuff. That if you have that. And of course, if you practice, I'm never gonna tell you that I'm gonna tell you the one way to win without putting in hard work. So you have to practice, but having those guides and having kind of some quick tips on things you need to keep in mind for those matchups can really take a lot of the front end work that you might have to put in the beginning and help kind of jumpstart your way to becoming an expert on the deck. So we're gonna put in a lot of work on those guides, and I think that they'll provide a lot of value to people that want to play those decks.
Yep, Brendan's already worked on his first one. But yeah, if you do want to support the show in any way, then we really appreciate it, and it helps us to continue doing what we're doing. And I think we have some really big plans for the channel and the future of Arsenal Pass as well. So this is just another way that we can help drive that, and looking forward to it. But anyway, Brendan, let's move on.
Yeah, I just want to shout out our videos on YouTube. So we had a Bolton versus Shane video go up on YouTube. Let us know what you think of the new thumbnail. We got to spice a little new thumbnail. We're officially YouTubers now. We did actually hit 1,000 subscribers, I think, this past weekend, which was incredible. Just a crazy feat for us to achieve, considering we started this about 5 months ago, and YouTube was something we didn't even really consider doing. It was kind of just a place we uploaded to make this podcast easier to listen to. And you can see how much that's changed now. So now we do consistently upload to YouTube both deck guides, gameplay, all that good stuff. A few little clickbait titles sprinkled in. Just kidding. We're not so bad with it. We keep it classy still. But yeah, the YouTube has been going crazy. I think we're already. I mean, by the time it goes up, we'll be creeping up to the 1.4, 1.5, which is incredible. I mean, it's growing almost exponentially at this point. So huge shout out to all of you that have been kind of consuming our YouTube content and shooting us that subscription. It means a lot. But yeah.
Yeah, thank you so much to everyone. I was just going to say, like, the reason, I guess the reason that we do this is to put out there information that's helpful. Like, and if I guess if it wasn't, people probably wouldn't jump on board. So I'm glad that and I love it. We saw it in some of our comments this week, which again, thank you for all the questions. It's just some really great questions out there that came from that, and some really cool info about some of the listeners to the pod who have done really well on their road to nationals, which is awesome to see.
All right, so I was going to say, so pack on the short shorts because we're heading out into the sun for, it's an entire episode dedicated to the Command and Cookout. So yeah, like I said, an entire episode devoted to questions submitted by you, the listeners. And without further ado, Hayden, let's just crack right into it because I know we got 92. Obviously, if we miss your question, we do apologize. We cannot get through them all, so we're gonna try to pick a few, and get some interesting ones.
Yeah, I'll give you some background, Brendan. First of all, this is vacation. We're not just going down to the beach for the day. We're on vacation. There's a lot of barbecuing, a lot of grilling this episode. So yeah, we got a number of questions. Thank you again to everyone who sent in. Or posted their question. Got a few on email as well. We do have a lot of questions. So what I'm going to do, Brendan, is I actually went through these questions the other day, and I broke these out into some sections. There's some really cool themes coming through in the questions that were asked this week. I think there's about 6 different themes. So I've kind of put these into different sections. We're going to try and go through as many of them as we can. We're not going to be able to get through all of them today, but everyone who did submit a question is into the draw to win the Coldfall Anathos, which we'll announce at the end. Got a really cool question, I think, that Anathos is going to. And anything we don't answer, we will either directly reply to you on the YouTube, or we will grab these questions. Maybe we'll put this into an overflow episode somewhere or something. Because there's some, to be honest, all these questions are awesome, and there's some real
great time in the round material.
There's some really good thought provokers for Brendan, especially as well. So yeah, Brendan, I'm just going to jump straight into it. The first section we've got is, I'm calling these the fun questions. So I've just grouped these all together, and the first one I'm going to throw out to you is this is a question for Brendan. So Brendan, this comes from Master Jono, and he says, how many Road to Nationals wins will it take for Brendan to ascend to Super Saiyan 2?
Super Saiyan 2. So I guess I'll go ahead and kind of spoil something that's not exciting at all, but I'm actually going to probably dye my hair white for Vegas. So the whole hair dye thing, obviously I wasn't even supposed to do it, but it's kind of funny. After going to these events in person, because we do Arsenal Pass and do these things like with the podcast and on YouTube, it's kind of nice to easily stick out, where I'm just like, oh, I'm like the dude with the bleached blonde hair, like the the weirdo in the corner. So I don't know. I think it's kind of interesting. I don't mind it at all. I think it looks fine. I might just go even more on the brighter spectrum. Just go white for Vegas. Be really easy to see. You can spot me out through thousands of people.
Yeah, well, it does help since you are on the shorter end of the height spectrum. People will be able to see you, even though you might be around chest height. So that does help people recognize who you are, Brendan. And also, you can really tell Brendan's really back into this. I didn't want to do the hair dye, but Brendan's loving it. So,
God, I want to do it for years. I just needed an excuse, and Hayden just gave me that.
All right, Hayden. Yeah, got another question.
Yeah, well,
from the Ovlov one. If Brendan slaps his cards down and Hayden Dale isn't around to hear it, does it still make a sound?
Yeah, so this obviously wins question of the year. This is a fantastic question. This is freaking hilarious. Does it make a sound? I have no idea, but apparently I slap my cards down, which I didn't even notice about. But and I think I do it. The more damage I'm doing, the harder I slap. It's a weird little tick I have, I guess.
Yeah. Okay. There you go. And according to another viewer, the harder he slaps, the harder he slaps. So there you go. Brendan, next question. As we move through some of these fun questions, if you had a chance to design a generic card to be released in the future, how would you want the card to function? Is there any maybe cards already in the game that you might template it off?
Yeah, so these are fun questions, right? So I'm going to give you a fun answer. I think that this card might actually ruin the game, so please don't print it. But I would like a card that does shuffle target player's deck. I think that'd be freaking hilarious.
That's actually so cool. Yeah, I think maybe in the current meta it wouldn't matter that much, but in past metas we've played or in future metas where deck stacking or pitch order is really important, that card could be super powerful.
Yeah, I think it's pretty funny, and especially as you get later into this game, if the format slows down again, the second, third cycles, that can be very important. Like, for example, decks like Bravo and Bravo Mirrors, your second, third, fourth cycle of your deck are incredibly important for winning. And the stack of that deck helps mitigate, I can't even say mitigate variance, because if you pitch badly, you're going to draw badly, right? You're doing it to yourself, but it'd just be hilarious if there was a card, maybe like Ultimate Pit Fight only.
Yeah.
Maybe an Ultimate Pit Fight pitch order doesn't matter too much, but I don't know if I'd like it on a competitive level. It might get a bit tilting.
Yeah, I don't know. It might have to cost a bit. The question is also from a name that I love, Shane, by the way. Great name. Cheers, Shane, by the way. If I had a card that was generic, you know what? I think I would love to see and again, a bit of a fun answer because I don't think you better print a card like this, but some combination of Timothy and Dow and Remembrance. Not sure what that would look like. But, throttle each, maybe you only get to shuffle one card in. You get to draw 2 cards but gain no life. I don't know, something like that. I'd love to see maybe something like that, but it could be a bit good, Brendan. We're not game designers for a reason, right?
Yeah. Oh, who knows? So, Hayden, speaking of game design, here's one from I don't know, it's Thibau or Tilbau. But which hero do each of you personally think will be the first one to hit Living Legend status and Classic Constructed? So it's just Living Legend status in the adult hero. I assume the answer is likely Chain. So that, so any theory or craft for what a new Shadow Runeblade hero would do. Hayden, you first.
I was just reading this question because it does say T does say the first what hero, so it could be a young hero. I actually think personally it's either gonna be Chain or Ira. I think that's to me is becoming pretty clear. But in saying that, Tales of Aria could come out and completely change up that, right? Like maybe for some reason whatever we currently think is going to happen doesn't happen. These 2 heroes continue to dominate their formats. Maybe Skirmish Season 3 is massive. We get a ton of skirmishes, which I think I talked about on Time the Round. That is my kind of concern with the scalability of the Living Legend changes. Maybe we get a double the skirmishes we had last season, and in Ira basically gets that much closer to retirement already. Could happen.
Mm-hmm.
If it was Chain, Theorycraft a new Shadow Runeblade hero. You know what? I would like to see it still obviously interact with the Banish. It's Shadow, right? So it needs to do it in some way. I would probably like to see it be, I guess, something that doesn't let you play as many cards in a single turn, right? So maybe not playing from Banish, but I would love to see maybe something like some sort of cost interaction with cards you have in Banish. Whether that be you pay cards from Banish to be able to play something, or you have to put cards into your Banish to be able to play something like that. I would like to see some sort of cost interaction. I think it's a bit easier to balance than playing multiple cards, although it could still have some play design issues. You'd have to really balance that.
Yeah. So to answer the kind of first question, I do think that it will be Chain, but it is completely dependent on how the events roll out. If we do, if Chain doesn't get, it doesn't hit Living Legend, I would say like pretty soon after North American Nationals, U.S. Nationals, then it might just be Ira out of a skirmish thing. But I really haven't done the math, so who knows who it could be. Obviously, if you just look at the data, it's like Chain is being played the most, it's winning the most, so we will see. And obviously, the meta could just totally shift because this is Flesh and Blood. Deck building is incredibly hard, and people figure out new things all the time. But yeah, in terms of a new hero, I haven't even really started thinking about it at all. But I will kind of side answer your question, which is that so if if Shadow Runeblade is banned, right? It's not like it's not like Ninja, because say Katsu is banned, you could still play Ira and Benji and Blitz. But say Shadow Runeblade was banned, or sorry, Chain was banned. How would they introduce a new Shadow Runeblade to the game, right? Is it okay? We have it already designed. It's coming out in X years in this set, or okay, this hero has been banned. Therefore, this class has been banned because only one Shadow Runeblade. So but obviously you can still play him in Blitz, but this class has been banned. Do they kind of like SOS give us a new hero pretty quickly? Does it come out immediately in the next supplemental set? I just don't know how that works. So it's interesting the idea that because yeah, if your entire class gets banned, if you're one of the one of those kind of people that only plays one class, or you identify with a certain class, and you're unable to play it now, I think that puts us in a weird place. And obviously it's unknown territory. So how will that kind of printing and adjustment work in the game?
Yeah, I mean, of course you can still play Viscera, right? Which excuse me, sorry, which means you get to still play your legendary
Viscera. You're correct. Yeah,
you get to still play your Grasp of the Arknight. You still get to play most of your Majestics. Obviously you can't play like Shadowversa and things that are Runeblade, Shadow Runeblade specific, but you do still have an aspect of Runeblade in the format. So, personally for me, I would be fine with them just, waiting. You don't need to see another Shadow Runeblade in a supplemental set straight away. We could potentially wait for that, but see what happens.
Awesome. So, Hayden, this one is from Sam Hoffman. It says, I'm totally new to the game. Are all of the heroes viable in both friendly and competitive settings? I think competitive answer is obvious based on this episode. Probably last episode. Yep. But will you still have fun playing underpowered but your favorite hero? i.e. Rhinar against friends. So I'll pick this one up quickly. I actually do think that every hero is viable in a competitive sense. In early Monarch meta, we actually saw Azalea see some success against Shane in the early days, right? Because the on-hit triggers would really punish that deck. So if the meta was, let's say, 90% dominated by Chain, and Chain was still losing to Azalea, I think the Chain deck has made some adjustments to where it's probably a bit stronger versus Azalea now. Azalea could be the pick, and Azalea, if we want to talk about underpowered in Flesh and Blood, Azalea is the name that comes to mind immediately, right? It's almost universally looked at as the underpowered hero. That being said, it's still a powerful hero, and it can be the right meta call. It's just Rangers designed kind of what it looks like some very specific metas. I mean, you have the on-hit triggers like Red No Ledger and things like this, but you also have the anti-defense reaction package, which is really interesting. So are they all competitive? I absolutely think so. The only one that maybe comes out of that list for me is Azalea. And even then, it's so close. And it's so close. But if you're playing for fun, yes, I do like to actively play less powerful decks, but not really less powerful decks. I don't pick them because they're less powerful, but I like to play more complicated decks when I'm playing casually. So Kano is very powerful in Blitz, but he is my favorite deck because I think he's one of the most complicated decks that has ever existed in Flesh and Blood. Yes, you do win some games by just memeing and stirring your opponent twice in a row or twice in a row and then, getting the damage. But right now, on a consistent game-to-game basis, I think the Kano deck in Blitz has the most lines that you can take in a single game, and I find that really interesting. And I thought it was awesome how I did a section where I played 100 games of Kano, like legitimately 100 games of Kano in like 15 days, and recorded all of them. And I saw myself get better all the way up to the 100th one, which is not something I would have experienced on, I think, some other heroes.
Interesting. Yeah. I would say Sam does know me very well. Said e.g. Rhinar. Rhinar is definitely one of, if not my favorite hero. I have this conundrum in my head where it goes back and forth about my favorite hero, but Rhinar will always, have a spot for me, and I love going back to Rhinar when I can. I agree with Brendan on, viability of heroes. I kind of compare it a little bit to, I guess if I use like a sporting player, right? Like the equipment often doesn't necessarily matter for players, right? They can use someone else's, baseball bat in a game, right? Like if you're competitive and you're a good player, I think most of the decks right now, most of the heroes you can build in a certain way to be competitive. But you're going to just see different shares of the metagame because not everyone's going to be able to grab those decks and play them to a high level. But every deck does have an element, I think, or every hero in the current sets have an element of being able to do that. In terms of, I also like playing decks that are less, I would say similar to what you said, Brendan. Like, the decks that are more fun to me, more enjoyable. There's more, lines to play. There's things I can work on. If I take Rhinar, for example, I think there's some really cool interactions that I love about the design of that hero that I like just playing because it's actively enjoyable to me. Same with Viserai. So yeah, I would agree on that. Move on to the next question, Brendan. Thanks for that question, Sam. There's a question from CryoShark. Do you think LSS will create a nationals-based team format, or tournament format, sorry, much like that of the Davis Cup golf? So if you've seen Davis Cup, it's, I believe that's the one where, and that's the Ryder Cup. I don't even know what Davis Cup is, sorry. So well, I should have looked that up maybe. Would this be a popular style of play, and would you prefer this over individual tournaments? I assume it's just it's like team play, right? So I assume you have some number of players playing off against each other for points. I guess it might be similar to the Ryder Cup where they have the US and Europe play off against each other in different sorts of play, different formats to get points. And then CryoShark says, what country do you think would have the advantage now?
Well, the last part of that question is a trap, so I don't know if I'm going to answer that. But would I like to see it? I would love it, yeah. So Red Riot Games, a store out of Canada, actually did a national team-based format. It was like a 5v5. And I think I can't remember if it's like a Pokemon style format. Basically, A faces A, then whoever loses, A face B, go, and a single elimination. And it was a really, really fun format. It was really cool with newer people that I didn't know too well. I knew them, but got to represent the US, and eventually we we actually technically won the tournament. But it was cool seeing Canada face Singapore and lose, very convincingly. And then we played against the UK and won. And yeah, I think it's an awesome format. I'm more interested in actually that sort of team format where it's I don't know what it's called, but you have like say it's 3v3, it's ABC, and like A faces A, and then after one loses, A faces B, and like you come in to the match with locked deck lists and locked orders right before, but as you progress round to round, so from team to team, you can't switch the decks, but you can switch the orders. So there's kind of like a whole nother sort of game that goes on there with like how you order your decks and what you put first. Because in Blitz, it was actually really relevant. If like we went up against Canada and we knew Canada had a very egotistical IRA player like Dante Delfico, we could just throw our OTK Viserai first and auto lose him. But I think I made things really. Sorry, just a little shout out Dante there, which they actually didn't do. Dante played last, but it was just really cool, and there was a lot more game elements to that tournament other than just playing Flesh and Blood. So I love team tournaments. I hope so. I don't know about a nationals thing, but any kind of team tournaments, I'm all game. Let's do it.
Yep. I just looked it up because the Davis Cup is tennis, but I know Ryder Cup is golf, so very similar thing. I think I would. Sorry, just to clarify, this question actually came from Cody. I'm going to read Cryo Shark's question next. So thanks, Cody. I like the idea of team formats. I think I've spoken this about in another podcast or in Time Around before, but team formats are one of my favorite things to play. We played the Battle Hardened on the day of the last Auckland Calling, so start this year, where we, is a 3v3 team format. I really like that. It was actually like a unified sealed. So, you get I think we had 10 packs or 12 packs to build our sealed pools from 3 sealed pools. I like that format. You can do it with constructed as well. I think teams is a great way to do I guess world formats, and I know like MTG did that in the past where they'd have like an individual championship and then they'd have a team championship as well on the same weekend where you'd have 3 players playing off against each other, best 2 out of 3. So yeah, I really like those formats, and it's something I would love to see in the future. What country do I think would have the advantage right now? I mean,
don't you? You're going to run yourself into a dangerous place.
Yeah, I just leave it. Look, I think as the game changes, we're going to see countries that are coming up in this game be very powerful in this game in terms of do very well. So, it might be a little bit skewed right now, but I'm sure we'll see that change. I'm going to go to Cryoshark's question, and then I've got one more from the fun section for you, Brendan, because I think you just have to answer it. But Cryoshark says, if you could change one thing about Flesh and Blood, what would it be? Very broad question there for you, Brendan.
Oh, if I could change one thing about Flesh and Blood.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I'll start.
That is, yeah. Go ahead. If you've got one in your mind, I've definitely got to give it a little bit of think.
I'll start because I think there's a number of things that I think just quality of life that LSS could change as we go forward, and there's some things that I guess like macro level I would love to see change from like a community perspective. But those are all things I think that are they don't detract from the game. I think one thing that I found tougher in just competitive play and what's happening is, and I don't want to open up a can of worms, but the breaker system is maybe not perfect for this game for competitive play. And I would just say the one reason I think that's true is that it can lead to, I guess, like anticlimactic top 8 cuts or top cuts, because basically if you lose your last round, you're probably into the top cut based on the number of rounds, unless you're at the threshold of players, in which case you may not. But yeah, it's something
that get locked after like round 4. It's pretty funny.
Yeah, and also to be locked out as well. There's no way you can like have this kind of heroic like start X and 1, lose your second to last round, still get it. Like it just comes down to when you lose your last round, which is a bit tough. But I actually think the whole premise of it is really positive in that it rewards the players who play against the toughest players at the end of the day and maybe lose to an X&O player or whatever it might be. But it does detract from, I guess, just makes it a bit anticlimactic. You can often exactly call the top 8. More often than not, you know exactly what the top 8 is before the last round even starts. So
yep, except for like, maybe 8th, 9th, depending on how many players. But yeah, I agree with you, but I actually like it. I didn't experience climactic top 8s because I didn't competitively play other games, but I do like that it does incentivize usually the better player getting in because you're losing later, you're playing harder opponents, all that good stuff. But if I could change one thing in Flesh and Blood, it's not going to be anything on game design right now. It's pretty much, I think that this will happen, by the way. I think this is in the process. I think we're making the correct steps to get there. But the organized play system in North America I think could be a bit revamped and managed more on like a micro level, store level. So some things that I didn't like were like skirmish. It was kind of a part-time job to get into a lot of skirmishes locally. And I do live in a very, very much of a hotbed of flesh and blood. Very hard to get in. And they just filled automatically, which is a capacity thing as well. But I think that like the prizes really shouldn't, they should be kind of proportional to the number of players as well. Like it feels pretty bad when I go to a 100-player event or a 50-player event and the prize is like X price. Like it's that sought after car, the sought after promo, and then someone can fly to somewhere where there's not much of a scene, a rural part of America, and then compete against and go to a 10-player event, and it's the same prizes, right? Or an 8-player where everybody's immediately in top 8. I wish that the prices rotated based off entrance, and yeah, and also this also like what I described happening with skirmish also happened with road to nats. Road hats were pretty hard to get into. You had to really be on top of it. Like I feel like you had to like not actively have a job that day when they were dropping and make all these calls, and it's just not how it should be in the future. And I think it will change. Just right now, our demand is outstripping the supply in certain areas, and it leads to some kind of not so great scenarios.
Yeah, I think that the really positive thing is that both things me and Brendan have said are not fundamental gameplay or things about the game that bother us or we would like to see changed. It's things that are probably more peripheral. And to be honest, these things will get better as the game grows and as LSS become more experienced. So I have no concerns, which is great. I actually just looked, Brendan. There's a couple more questions that I think are really cool. So I'm just going to rattle through those, and then we have I think there's only a few questions left in this section. So. Bit of quick fire. Who is the voiceover actor for our intro, Brendan? They sound epic and it always gets me hyped. That's from Jason Sid Robertson.
Yeah, so that's Dante Delfico, but with a little bit of editing, just like a very slight amount.
Great. Do you guys think you're going to do a tier list or ranking of all heroes for Constructed? Like what we think, not just the data. That's from Achilles. I will say that we will probably do something like that. I just don't know if we'll do it on our main channel. I'm not sure it's something that we would necessarily. Yeah, I don't know. We probably will do something.
Depends how much we want to sell our soul to YouTube, because tier lists they're pretty. You've really sold yourself when you get there. That's a dark point, but I think it's every YouTuber's evolution is to make tier lists. That being said, to answer your question, kind of like the most useful way right now, we do not agree with the data in terms of if you were to look at the data and make a tier list based off that, it'd be vastly different from the way that we actually view the meta.
Yeah, tier lists are difficult in this game, I think, because of how much builds and play skill and things come into it. But it does look like we might be the only ones who haven't done it, Brendan. So, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, upcoming tier list. Who's the most handsome player in Flesh and Blood? There we go.
Oh, controversial. Mr. M says, why isn't Hayden a blonde boy? Yet a blonde boy? Look, I'm working on something. Something will happen in the future. I'm still very much stuck in quite a strict lockdown where I leave my house for a little bit of exercise and to go to the grocery store once every few days, and that's kind of it. But watch the space. But Brendan's taken up the mantle and he's going to go white for you, so don't worry about it. This one is for me apparently. This comes from Jack Glavin, who said he just top 8'd the Road to Nationals in Hobart, which is in Tasmania, Australia, which is a friggin' beautiful place. If you ever come to Australia, go to Tasmania and go to. It's fantastic. It's this little island at the very end, south end of Australia. That's just fantastic. So he just top 8'd the Road to Nationals there. Actually, I was meant to be at. He's just shouted out to say that I was going to be there. He said it's a shame that you guys didn't come down. But beyond our control, unfortunately. But next time we'll get down there. Any excuse to go to Hobart and to Tasmania, I'll be there. Jack wanted to ask though, what would I have been playing? Would it have been Chain or something a little bit out of left field? Cheers for the question, Jack. It's a difficult question because my perspective on Road to Nationals kind of changed once I knew that I wasn't going to be able to play in Road to Nationals, basically. So I mean, I likely would have done something similar to Brendan because obviously we're on the same testing schedule. I probably would have played Chain because we had this very strong deck, at least one or two Road to Nationals. But I also have a couple of decks sitting in the locker that I really want to bust out at some point in Road to Nationals. I'm trying to get Brendan to play one of these decks, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. But yeah, I think my aim was to play at least 3 different decks because there's 2 other decks I really wanted to play in this season.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny in our testing group. I think Hayden. I mean, it's not. I mean, Hayden definitely plays chain the least by
Yes.
far, almost never. So he's doing God's work over there, just playing the gauntlet decks.
Yeah, I just play the gauntlet decks, which makes sense at this point, because we know that I'm not going to be playing these events. Anyway, last question. We're going to move on from the section, Brendan.
All right, guys. So we're gonna head into the second section, which is classic constructed meta questions. So obviously a very kind of interesting sort of macro group we have here, very relevant with Road to Nationals being every weekend right now, and then we have the calling coming up. So let's start off with the first one. So curious what you guys think of Dash, why you think that Dash will be everywhere this weekend. And then he quoted some numbers, which makes Dash look like not really the deck to pick, and alluded to Shane being very good on the numbers, which is correct. So why would people go back to Dash? So Dash, in my opinion, is like a nostalgia deck. So Dash was an extremely dominant deck in Crucible of War meta, based off numbers. So we'll talk numbers. And for a lot of people, I think that Dash was their deck. Like that was their pet deck. And Dash does something that a lot of decks don't do. It starts with items. It develops a permanent board state that gives itself incremental advantage until it's basically in an unlosable position. And it can also be played from a control strategy, really punish things like Warrior and stuff like this, decks that people typically sometimes have very bad feelings about. So it was very much, I don't know, I think it was a bit of an identity deck in Crucible. And basically when Monarch came out, that deck got deleted. Like you couldn't play that deck. It was so bad in so many ways because it was control. Like the Monarch meta has been defined by not having reactive strategies. It's been mostly proactive strategies. And the Dash control pistol deck or whatever was very reactive. So it struggled versus a lot of the new stuff in the meta. So Matt Rogers won at Road to Nationals with it and did a deck tech about it. And I think that people just wanted an excuse. They wanted their, I don't know, their disciple to come down and tell them that, hey, this deck exists. It's back. It's okay. You can play it. Be safe again. And they're like, yes, finally. So I think that's why people got back on Dash. Did Dash perform? No, it didn't. It didn't perform well at all in North America, actually. Is it a decent deck? Yeah, it's actually decent. It's pretty good. It's really good into Bravo and some other things, but has some pretty bad matchups outside of that. And it's just, I think fundamentally it's a little bit more fair than some other decks that are currently in the meta. But yeah, I think for me, that's why I think the Dash I expected it to kind of surge, and it did. In my week 2, Dash was extremely popular. Like we went from I saw one Dash week 1 to seeing, I mean, somewhere between 10 and 15, maybe even 20% of the field walk up with their old Dash list ready to go. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. What were your thoughts, Hayden?
Yeah, it probably didn't. I guess maybe when we were talking about it, it kind of gave off the impression that we thought it was going to be like as big as Chain. I guess we never thought that, but we definitely thought it was going to grow to week 2, and it probably didn't grow maybe as much as week 2 to 3. Sorry, maybe as much as we'd thought or Brendan had quoted, but it definitely did grow in popularity, and it makes sense, right? Just in terms of the decks that it was trying to target in that format and the results we'd seen the week before. I think there's a place for Dash in this format. Like that's the reason that it's going to see play. We're starting to see a somewhat evolving metagame through these weeks, so that's it just felt like a logical pick, especially when you look at maybe some of the matchups. We knew Bravo was still popular. Bravo had another big weekend last weekend, so it makes sense for Dash to show up. Brendan, these next 3 questions I'm rolling together because they're very similar. These come from Michael Fay, Will Evans, and Christopher Munro. Also, that last question was from Focus Flute, so thank you. What does Livia need to become more competitively viable? That's one of the questions. Why do you think Livia has been underplayed in the current meta? And the third question is, you mentioned that Livia might be a good meta call. What do you think the big advantage Shadow Brute has over regular Brute in this meta? Thanks. So that's from Michael, Will, and Christopher. So I've just rolled these questions together because they're very similar. They're all about Livia. So what do I think, Livia needs to become more competitively viable? I guess it needs testing is what I would say. I think there's a lot of tools there for Livia right now. Why do I think it's been underplayed? For the same reason. It just hasn't been tested as much. People haven't been working on it as much, or I guess finding... It's a very difficult deck to build, I think, and it's also a very difficult hero to play. There's a lot of things going on where you have to manage, unlike Chain, where it's a lot easier to manage your blood debt. It's a lot more difficult with Livia because you're actively trying to manage your graveyard at the same time and then put cards from your graveyard into your banish that want to kill you, which makes it more difficult. What I think the big advantage is over regular brute with Shadow Brute. It's just pure damage output in this format. I think Reinhardt has the Intimidate mechanic, which is really, really powerful into, like heroes that want to slow down the game and block out and be defensive and do a little bit of combination of blocking and attacking. And you get to throw an Intimidate in there and really mess up their plans and take cards out of their hand and not let them execute their plan. When decks are just wanting to play out 5-card hands and don't really care if they defend or not, Intimidate becomes a pretty weak mechanic. So you miss out on extra damage or output that Shadow Brute has in favor of the Intimidate mechanic, and it's just it's probably not where you want to be in the current meta, is my thought. But what do you think, Brendan?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I'm just gonna kind of cut straight to, maybe leaking a little bit more than we should, but I feel comfortable with it because Levia is dogged on so much. So Levia is perceived as like even more unplayable than Azalea by some players. So without leaking too much, I'll say that we do have a deck in our testing group that is very, very good. The only reason why we're not playing it is because we think we have a deck that's better, that has good matchups into everything. And Levia is just sometimes not over 50% on, a very popular, another very popular deck in the meta, Chain. So because of that, it seems like it's objectively better to just play a different deck. But the deck that Hayden has brewed up and that he's been playing into us has been performing extremely well. So it's actually something that I'm looking forward to playing at a road to nationals and all that kind of stuff. And it does use claws. I will say that because a lot of people are asking me like, Hexagrass, and like that. I'm comfortable saying like it does use claws, and the deck is extremely impressive. And it's crazy how much damage that thing puts out.
I do like Hexagore though. I just haven't been able to find as consistent a way to play
for Chain, right?
Yeah, just the current format, I think. But yeah, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you want to go to next, Brendan? Any questions? We could go to. Here's a good one for you. If the Bolton secret is let out of the bag, not sure what the bag is. Say it's as represented as Prism or Katsu. What's the conversion rate then? And does Chain sit just as pretty at 38%? I'm guessing that's from John Franey, and I'm guessing what he's asking is does Bolton start to cut into Chain's win rate?
For sure. I think that like there's actually a phenomenon going on where a lot of people are hopping onto Chain because they think the deck is easy. And I'll be here to tell you right now, someone who plays the deck a lot, it is easy in aggro. So a lot of people are picking up this deck, playing aggro mirrors throughout and then getting a lot of easy wins. And then when they get up to a tough game, again, they require you to practice the deck, maybe not having so much success. I'm actually seeing a lot of people hop off of Chain onto other picks that they're more comfortable with. This is happening. Like I was talking to a very notable player, Gail McCreath, recently. He was telling me about this happening in New Zealand, and it's totally reasonable to happen. People are hopping off of Chain. There was kind of a craze when he was first very popular in week 1, and now in week 2, and he won again in a big event, and people hopped onto Chain. You see success with Chain. It's pretty easy to see the base power of Chain. After that, the deck does get quite complicated. Like I actually think that Chain into certain archetypes is probably one of the hardest things you can be doing in Flesh and Blood right now. Like some of the end games that you have to craft and board states that you have to manage, border on extremely difficult. So yeah, I mean it's an interesting deck. And so will people go to Bolton, right? So if we want to talk about variants, like I think the Chain has variants and it's frustrating and all that kind of stuff. But if we're talking about variants, I think Bolton's got more variants, right? If you don't draw your charge cards, it's see you later, right? If in an aggro format, you got to draw pretty well, it feels like, as Bolton. And I think to be the persistent aggro deck that is not Chain, you need to have a decent matchup in the Chain. I just think that aggro Katsu is better positioned than Bolton right now to do that, right? Bolton has a good matchup into mech. I haven't played it myself, but that's what I've heard. Katsu aggro has a better matchup, right? Katsu aggro seems like that's kind of the deck. I expect Katsu aggro to be consistent and sort of rising in popularity. Chain stay where it is. Bolton definitely, I think, will get more popular. I don't think that it is the pick, like you mentioned. Like, is it going to surge past Prism or Katsu? No, I don't think so. But will it become more popular because it was very underappreciated and the deck is actually quite strong? I think so.
Yep. Yeah, it's... I think, people had definitely dogged on, they'd been trying to dunk on Bolton, saying it wasn't a very good hero. It didn't play very well. I think people have proven that's not true. You talked about consistency, Brendan. You can make this deck more consistent. You do have to sacrifice some power. So it does come down to a bit of a question of how you want to play this deck. And I think that's actually one of the strengths of this deck is that you can adapt it. You've got multiple weapons to choose from. The hero has a really powerful, I guess, inherent ability, but it needs its cards to support that. I guess the question around, is it going to be as represented as Prism or Katsu? I agree. I don't think it will. Just because I actually think Bolton isn't that easy to play into wider fields. So if the field is pretty wide with, say 6-7 heroes showing up more than 7 or 8%, you need to be prepared for these matchups. But the one thing that Bolton can do really well is it plays better as a mid-range deck than, say, maybe like an aggro Katsu might need to do, or an Azalea or something needs to do in certain matchups, because you have access to some pretty strong defense reactions. You have Soul Shield. You have this ability to set up for really strong late game plans by setting up your Soul and getting your Luminar Ascensions and Beacons ready via the Vanguards, etc. So I think it's a really powerful thing that Bolton can do. I think if it starts seeing more play, I actually think we'll see the conversion rate go down. I just think the people who've been playing it so far have understood the deck, are probably outperforming what you'd expect the average of results to be if this was a more widely played hero.
Mm-hmm. All right, Hayden. So this one's from Brandon. He says, what's your recommendation on how to tackle a changing meta? Should you stick with your main hero due to familiarity and make deck adjustments, or should you change your hero to counter the evolving meta?
Yeah, this is a great question because I don't think there's one right answer. It's going to depend on who you are as a player and your experiences. So I'll give this an example. If you're going into a road to nationals, say this weekend or next weekend, so you've got a few days, or you've got 7 or 8 days to prepare for it, I think actively changing to a hero that you don't know is probably going to be a bad thing. I don't think you're going to be able to get enough reps against the main decks in the format, unless for some reason you've got 10 days in a row to just test for a few hours a day, 6-7 hours a day. You're probably going to be at a disadvantage to then if you just took the hero that you know a lot better and tried to adapt that deck to target the meta. And that's just because there's so many intricacies in Flesh and Blood, right? And even if you have a deck that has a perceived strong matchup into a certain hero, if you don't know how that game actually plays out, you're going to struggle, first of all, to enact that strategy. But if your opponents play that matchup, they're definitely going to be adapting their strategy. And if you don't know even how to play level 1 of your strategy, and then you need to get to level 2 to win the match because your opponent's gone to level 2 of their game plan, it'll be very, very difficult. And you're probably going to have a pretty bad day, I'd say. There's definitely certain decks that have so much power that, just enacting your game plan can work really well. And these are probably, say, more aggressive decks in general. But I do think it is really difficult if players are adapting their strategies to target these decks, and you don't know how they're going to do it, and you can't yourself sort of readjust as the game goes on. So I would say in general, if you're trying to target a meta and you only have a limited time to do it, you're going to be better off taking a deck that you think is reasonable and trying to target the meta that way by changing your game plan or whatever it might be. But if you have more time, then yeah, I think playing a different hero could be a way to go.
Yeah, this is an interesting question. So I always default to playing what you're comfortable with, because I think that will lead to success more than trying to make a meta call and playing a new deck. But really, it depends on the type of player you are and the amount of time you have. Because I would give that advice, but then again, I'm a total flavor of the month player, right? But I think I put in enough practice to be able to do something like that. Where if I didn't have this time to practice, I definitely would not make that decision. I think that coming underprepared to underpractice on a deck is probably one of the worst things you can do, because in an aggro meta, it's a bit different, right? It's a bit face up on what you're trying to do when you're playing aggro mirrors and things like this. But if someone tries to drag you into deep water, take you into the late game, and you don't know how your deck functions and how to manage, you think your life total is a resource, right? But your cards and your threat density and the overall damage your deck can do is also another resource. And if you don't know how to manage that, it can get really tough in those later games. This actually came up in we played Dash versus Reinar, and Hayden actually he had decided to employ an aggressive strategy versus me, where if he had decided to play control, Reinar is theoretically favored. But it was interesting because in the aggressive matchup, I was actually able to win. But if he had played the control version of the deck, control strategy, I probably would have lost simply because I didn't know how to navigate that end game scenario, what cards to stack, when to save them, when to trade them, all this kind of stuff. And the game state would have been much more complicated. So even though I was favored as Reinar versus control mech, I probably would have ended up losing just because I wasn't comfortable on my deck and I didn't know my way to win if somebody was playing kind of like a hardcore, very resource management control deck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I have a question here. This actually flows really nicely into the question about changing heroes, and it's a question from someone who's written. You stated in a previous episode that you felt after week 1 Katsu was weak because of his reactive game plan, but then you took Bravo to week 2. Bravo is reactive normally. Yeah, it's a great question. What specifically made you feel Bravo was better into week 2 instead of Katsu? And that's from a name that I definitely don't know how to pronounce. Sorry. To say it's Sovale Mizram, I'm going to say. Apologies.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, why did I bring Bravo? Good question. So, I didn't bring Bravo because I thought he was the best, but I did want to switch things up. The Bravo list that I was on was actually quite aggressive, and it was quite proactive. So, it was prepared for an aggro meta. That being said, I really did not expect the dash as much as I was, and that definitely felt like it was my downfall. Did I have a reactive strategy versus something like Chain? Yes, I did. Why was I comfortable with that? Because I didn't think that the people that I would be playing in my local meta would be prepared to beat that strategy. Um, I think it's very beatable. Obviously, I've done it quite consistently. That's why I've won. Like people have tried to play a reactive strategy versus me when I played Chain quite a lot through these roads national events, and it doesn't work. But I didn't. I thought that I could employ that strategy versus other players, and I thought that my deck was proactive outside of the chain mirror, outside of the chain match. Just really didn't expect the dash. The dash got me, and like when it was a big event. So that event was like 62 players, or something like that, and like the top tables were just flooded with dash. It was ridiculous. There was so much dash at the top tables. But yeah, I ended up missing and coming 10th. But I think the Bravo's legit. Like if you look at the conversion rate, look at the data, Bravo does do very well. But I don't know if that's off the back of people being a bit inexperienced on some of the other decks that are playing into him, because I don't think that he's particularly well positioned at the moment.
I just wanted to add on to that because obviously I was part of this decision to get saying to Brendan to take this list and to play Bravo. I think the reason to take it over playing Katsu is, and I don't know if I've said this enough, but I just don't think that Katsu Control is a good deck in this current meta. I just think the proactive decks that are out there are really difficult for you to deal with. Once you get into so Katsu could be a reasonable deck to take to make it into like top 16, maybe top 8. But I just don't think you're going to be able to win stronger field events with Katsu Control.
Yeah. Shouldn't win a big event with Katsu Control. You should almost certainly lose. Like, it's by far the worst deck in the format. Is it a challenging deck to face? Yeah. No, it's the worst. Like, it's the worst for sure. And, like, it's a challenging deck to face if you don't know how to beat it, I guess. So, the fact that deck won some other events, like I think they were a bit smaller and people just weren't prepared to beat Katsu Control. But in terms of like actual theory on how things are lining up in the meta, like Katsu Control is extremely poorly positioned. And the deck also lost its like key tool, which is like kind of why it existed, which was Drone of Brutality. So like Mech is just a strictly better deck, kind of. It's weird. But yeah, never would have considered bringing Katsu Control. But Katsu Aggro, that's a legit deck. I'm a big fan of that deck. And at the event that I was at in Edmond last weekend, 52 players, someone went 6-0 with it. So that's a Katsu's a force.
Mm-hmm. It's a good deck right now. Aggressive, yeah. Question from Mitchell O'Keefe. What were the dark horses of the Monarch meta? Shout out to Mitchell. Mitchell's a local Sydney player as well. Or a local Australian player, sorry.
Yeah, so I just want to quickly say, definitely Kano is a bit of a dark horse because a lot of people are still not packing in Lorun. I think we saw some Kano's top 8 over in New Zealand. I didn't see anybody play it in my region in the south, but yeah, it's definitely a dark. Like it's pretty much the definition of a dark horse, right? Like people just are not objectively, but they're just kind of disrespecting it and not even putting Null Root in their list. And you could just seriously steamroll an event. That being said, the question has to be answered: can Kano win against decks that don't have Null Rune or just have Null Rune 1? And that's really what it comes down to. Is like, can you win an event off the back of people being underprepared in their deck list creation?
Yeah, I mean, I personally think it probably can. I think
too.
the Kano had a top 4 last weekend. I think I'm pretty sure that was in the US. But yeah, good to see Kano out there, and definitely like the definition of a dark horse, right? Is that it's written off, and if people are riding off Kano, they're not going to show up with Nara, and so the perfect opportunity for a dark horse like Kano to shine. I also think that we talked about Levia before. I think it is a bit of a dark horse. Probably the other one, and I think the last weekend's results probably show that it's not necessarily actually seen by a lot of people as a dark horse. And when you look at the results, but it's actually Dorinthia. To be honest, I would maybe position that as a dark horse. Although it did see uptick in play and results last weekend.
Yeah, that's an interesting one with Dorinthia, because there is a list that one of our friends plays that it's quite decent into chain, but then most of the lists that I've encountered in the wild per se or out of tournaments have been very weak into chain, and borderline. Yeah, I don't know. So it's weird. It's a weird deck to try to balance, to be strong into an aggressive deck with Husk like chain, and then also be strong into a deck like Bravo that's going to have defense reactions. Um, yeah, it's an interesting little puzzle to solve, but haven't seen too much Dorinthia myself, but I did face one in round 5 at my event.
Hard to do everything in this format, right, Brendan? That's why I guess actually just a really good example of why we keep saying proactive game plans are what we would favor in this current meta.
Yeah, it's hard to do everything unless you have the deck that does everything. That one definitely exists.
There's a question from Nathan Lapham. If Dash is going to make a resurgence in the meta, will Brute rise along with her? I'll answer this one first. I think it should. Will it? I don't know, but we did see some Rhinos put up some good results last weekend, and I'm sure that at least a handful of those players who made those top 4s and top 8s thought, well, there's probably going to be a reason why Dash at my event. I'm going to take Brute.
Yeah, I think Dash has a pretty bad matchup in the chain, so I don't think that Dash will make a resurgence in the meta. You can definitely prey on Bravos with that deck, and you have decent matchups otherwise. I just think that like the most popular deck in the meta, like Dash has a bad matchup into. We might see the success from most of these dashes might be because the skill level of some of the chains that are running into them, where they're able to fatigue them or do whatever strategy they have. But generally, I think that is it's quite chain favorite. So I'm pretty surprised. So with that, I actually think that Dash will kind of fade back out of the meta, kind of. But will still be around. I mean, we went from week 1 with it like almost not being represented at all to being a significant force if you show up to an event.
Yeah. Last question, Brendan, that I want to ask before we move on to the next section. This comes from Tom Felipe. He says, huge fan of the show, and divorce jokes shake him to the core. Question, if the current trend of increasing chain victories continues, will LSS need to take action with an errata or something else, even prior to the natural living legend status banning process?
Yeah, so I personally don't think so. And anybody who listens to this podcast knows that I've ranted. I probably have a perception of chain that is much higher than a lot of other respectable players that are around. And even now I'd say no, because I think the living legend status is pretty sufficient. And I think that, yeah, I think it's a solid model, and I don't think we need any erratas. The deck isn't like disgustingly overpowered to where you just win no matter what every time. There are strategies that are harder to beat, and there are certain archetypes that you just really can't be like guaranteed to win. I mean, that's mostly aggro, right? So I think I mean, the deck is definitely strong. Look at the math, look at the numbers, but doesn't need an errata? I don't think so.
Yeah, there's 3 things that make me say no to their question. That living legend status will be enough. The first is that it's not actually easy to play to a high level and beat the strategies that have targeted chain. The second is that I think the meta still looks reasonably healthy. I think there's the metagame breakdowns that we're seeing. I think is fine. Chain's doing well, but so are some other heroes. And the third factor is that you still get to play Flesh and Blood. It's not a hero that, yes, breaks the fundamentals of the game to a point that you don't get to enjoy and play games of Flesh and Blood and still be able to win every single game of Flesh and Blood that you play when you sit down, opposite a chain player. Which in other games where you've had to see, I guess, erratas happen or things happen to maybe ban certain cards, is because you sit down and it's a non-game. People are turn zero comboing or whatever. There's heaps of other things. So I think there's those three reasons why I think it isn't needed right now. Cool, Brennan. We're going to move on to some questions about the future of Flesh and Blood. So I just want to say thank you to the viewers and listeners that submitted those questions on the Classic Constructor meta. We didn't get through all the questions there. There were some really similar questions. We might come back to some in the future. But yeah, questions about the future of Flesh and Blood, Brennan. It's a bit far into the future, but with National Champs being just over a month after the release of Tales of Aria, what do you think will be the best strategy to go with, assuming you can get plenty of testing done? Playing a brand new deck to surprise the meta, like the new Ranger, or playing a reliable, proven deck like Chain? And that comes from Wookie KX.
Yeah, I mean, I think this actually links back to a question we answered earlier. I think you have the time to practice and put the work in to learn a character. Like, it's totally viable to bring a new character and switch onto a deck. I know for me, if there was a deck that came out that I thought was positioned better, was stronger, I would play it. But I know that I might be in the minority there with how much like Flesh and Blood I play. But yeah, I mean that's kind of where I stand on the topic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. It's going to come down to just testing time, and I think it could go either way. It's going to be really interesting to see what Tales brings. I think the one thing is that right now we know absolutely nothing about Tales of Aria, so it's really difficult to say what Nationals could hold. But Nationals does come reasonably quickly, especially for some countries, presumably hot on the heels of Tales of Aria, probably a month to 6 weeks.
All right, so next we have a question from Mooseberry Jr., which is actually pretty funnily written. I don't know, I'm just messing up my words there. But he said, what do you think the world's meta will shake? How will the world's meta shake down, I guess, with American aggression or defensive-minded New Zealand, Australia meta, or even the Kano-loving, spell-slinging, combo-breaking Southeast Asian players? That is an interesting way to phrase it. So I have to say I definitely disagree a little bit on the categorizations of the different regions. I think that, man, if I had to put it one way, it's New Zealand, Australia. I don't know. It's impossible, right? We haven't played much at all. There's been no kind of universal events, but is there a specific kind of archetype that is defining of a region? The only one I can think of is like Taiwan. Definitely plays like a ton of Dorinthia and Ninja, and has for like 2 years.
Yeah, I actually think it's funny because I think the New Zealand Australia metas are actually somewhat different to a degree, and actually I wouldn't have necessarily thought of like defensive minded, but I'm going to go back to the question about what the world's meta might shake down like. I don't think it'll be regionally impacted to much of a degree, to be honest. I think what we're more likely to see is strategies come out of those regions for the specific event. More potentially, because you're probably going to get players, if it's a world's event, you're going to get players working together probably within those regions. So you'd probably get a group of New Zealanders working together. You'd have, or probably multiple groups of New Zealanders working together, multiple groups in North America, group or two in Europe, a group or two in Asia and Australia probably. So I think more likely you probably see prevailing strategies come from those areas, and it could depend on just what the set before Worlds gives you, to be honest.
Yeah, it's definitely much more group or team based, whatever you want to call them. Yeah, and those I don't know. I think we're in a weird position, but the people that we test with are all from a different country.
Yeah,
so
funny.
Yeah, it's pretty funny.
Cool. This is a question from Brian Dodonna. It's fair to say most of your listeners, so the Arsenal Pass listeners, are interested in competitive Fab. Do you think focusing on that type of player is enough for Fab to succeed long term, or will LSS need to find a way for Flesh and Blood to appeal to more casual players as well? He's added a little bonus question here. We'll let you away with that, Brian. How could they do that? Or how do they do that if they think they're already?
Mm-hmm. So 2 things immediately come to mind. Like Ultimate Pit Fight, which is obviously not an established or kind of very played format right now, but could be in the future. If we get to, it's going to be a while before we get to like commander levels like they have in Magic the Gathering.
Yeah,
But I think that Blitz is a format created for
100%.
casuals. So we have a very, very popular and prevalent format that is created specifically for casual players and casual games. I know it doesn't feel like that because like everybody was like taking skirmish super seriously, but it's a casual format, right? It's fast, small decks, and I don't know, you can kind of play whatever you want, right? Theoretically. So I think that is the casual format of Flesh and Blood, where Classic Constructed is its pinnacle of competitive play.
Yeah. Look, the answer to the question for me is could Flesh and Blood or LSS focus on competitive players exclusively? Definitely not. The game would fail. I think, it would be a very small game at that point. I wouldn't say it would fail because it could easily live on, but it'd be a very small game at that point. The thing that LSS have already done, and they've already planted these seeds, is with Blitz, is with UPF. Blitz, as Brendan said, you're going to see it transition to much more of a casual format. The reason it's been seen, I guess, as a more competitive format so far is that effectively skirmish events, which, if you've ever played other games like Magic the Gathering or, even other games, it's effectively a game day. Skirmish is a very casual store-based format. The reason it's been so prevalent and prominent in the discourse and in the focus of competitive players is because there's been no other events for players. So that was kind of the first focus. But we'll see, Pro Quest events, Pro Tours, Worlds, more callings, Nationals, Regionals, all these things, Road to Nationals happen so much more frequently that an event like Skirmish does actually start to fill its role, which is to be a store level tier 1 event, which is, for getting players into the game. And that's where Blitz is going to have its home. Not to say that Blitz won't be used as a competitive format from time to time, but the limited play and Classic Constructed are going to be the formats that LSS push for the competitive side. I have no doubt about that. So I think the seeds they've already planted in order to grow the game from both a competitive standpoint and a store level and casual game is already there. And you see it's a game that is definitely with collectors in mind. It's not just for, I guess, players who are competitive minded. So I think they've already got the seeds there. It's just about how that sort of shakes out over the next 18 months.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And Hayden, this is a slightly different section, but I really like this question. So it's from Ognarat. It says, if you could go back to when you started playing the game, what are 1 to 2 pieces of advice you'd give yourself?
Yep. Yeah, good question. I think the first one would be to think or approach the game and deck building from a more, I guess, theoretical standpoint. I think when I started playing Flesh and Blood, and for a very long time in Flesh and Blood, I was very practically driven by my decisions in deck building and how I developed strategies for playing a game. I was using anecdotal evidence, or I was using, I guess, certain examples that I had at my disposal, which could be, I don't know, having this card in my deck is good because in the games I've played so far, it's done X, Y, Z. Whereas, if I'd taken a step back and thought about what that card actually does, I would have gone, oh yeah, this card does X, Y, Z, but also it's a card that defends for 2, which hurts my overall plan of blocking more, defending more aggressively in the early game. Or it's a card that pitches for red, and it's a card I do want to pitch for late game, but it pitches for red, so it's really hard to get to the bottom of my deck for late game. Things like that. So I think approaching a game from a more theory base as well really has been a big win for me, I think, in this game in terms of how I construct decks and construct strategies. And just means I have to spend less time playtesting things that should be really obvious to me or could be really obvious to me, but in the past I would just jam them in the deck and play them out and then work out 50 games down the line that actually this card is nowhere near as good as I thought it was, or the strategy is nowhere near as good as I thought it was. I've got a second piece, but do you have a first piece to start with, Brendan? We can kind of back and forth it.
I've got 2 pieces as well. It works out perfectly. So if I could give myself 1 piece of advice back when I started, it'd be to pay attention to more things, pay attention to everything. It's kind of easier now because you have online resources, people telling you that things like your pitch order and there's these advanced concepts. We have pitching your deck. We have the overall kind of value of your deck, the damage that's left in there. If you're playing Ninja, the combo lines that are left, all these more complicated things where you're exhausting resources just by playing cards, and you have to kind of keep that up as you cycle through the second, third, all this kind of stuff. And I think at the beginning I took it more at face value and kind of played my hand, which is the biggest trap in Flesh and Blood. Just playing your hand as you draw it is probably one of the worst things you can do. The depth of this game goes much deeper, and there's very much is a macro strategy to every game, while there is a micro strategy to every hand. And I think if I had just paid more attention and respected those concepts a bit more, I probably would have I don't know, bared that fruit a bit more.
Yeah, my second piece is, to be honest, I wish I just knew that. I wish someone had told me that I should just always have a plan of how I'm going to win the game, no matter if I'm playing, a game of draft, I'm playing a sealed game, I'm playing a blitz game, playing class constructor, whatever the format is, whatever deck I'm playing. That I should know in my mind, at least roughly how I want to win the game. I played so many games of Flesh and Blood for so long with an idea of what my deck did. I have a really aggressive deck, or I have these cool combinations of cards, but didn't necessarily know how I was going to win the game. And lucky for me, I just stumbled upon my wins, or I guess my fundamentals were okay that I managed to get into winning positions, or I accrued enough advantage over the game that it didn't matter. But I definitely lost games because I just didn't know how I was going to win the game.
Yeah, so number 2 for me is something that I think I did really well at the beginning, and I'm really happy that I did it from the start. And that was that, putting myself out there and kind of being a part of the community. I think this is this can be a solo, venture, or kind of a community-based game, or whatever you want it to be. But putting myself out there, meeting new people, and just fully embracing everything this game had to offer was definitely the most rewarding thing that I did when I started playing this game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I wanted to ask one more question from, I guess, questions about the future of Flesh and Blood, because I think this question is great. It comes from Ark, and it says, what gives you the confidence that Flesh and Blood has legs for long-term viability? And my answer is actually just really simple, and that it's Legend Story Studios. I think the developers of this game and those who made this game are unlike any other studio. I mean, I talk to game store owners, and they say by far the best team they have to deal with. They've created an asset that is fantastic, and to be honest, they're just doing a good job with it so far.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. The person who actually sold me on the game was James White. So I went down to a tournament in Austin, which was a calling, funny enough, because it was just a tournament back then. And I went to a Subway with James White, and he sold me on his big, wide plan for Flesh and Blood. And it was just so well thought out. I love the game by that point. I've been playing like religiously in kitchen table with like my partner, but just seeing how passionate the guy behind everything was, and seeing how well thought out, how much experience, and I don't know, it was really the kind of the play, like the mission they have behind this game is so solid, and I think the gameplay 100% backs it up. So
Yeah.
I definitely think that it will be a long ride, and I'm in for it.
At a Subway, that's fantastic.
Yeah, it's 100% true.
So good. All right. Got some questions for, I guess, new players, Brendan. Then we've got one more section that we're going to move down to. I guess this is, new players / development is what I've coined the section. And the first question comes from Brandon Alvarado, who says, love the content, guys. Keep it up. My question for you guys is, how does a beginner such as myself pick a deck to start their Flesh and Blood journey with? This is, a great question. I think I actually just, funnily enough, just wrote an article for Channel Fireball on this very topic about picking up your first deck for Classic Constructed, or picking up a new deck for Classic Constructed. I think the best way to do it, to be honest, is to take a look at the hero pool, take a look at some content out there in terms of some of the deck profiles people are writing up. I think go have a look at this article I just put up. It gives you a bit of a description of what may appeal to you and why a deck might appeal to you, and then just make a decision based on that. If it's, and there's a few reasons, if you want to be a competitive player, then look at the more competitive content. If you are happy to just be enjoying the game for as much fun as you can extract out of it at armories and playing with friends, etc., then make your decision based on that. But I think have a really clear idea of why you would want to play this game, and then you can easily choose your first hero or deck off the back of that.
100%.
Brendan just nods in agreement. Perfect. All right, we can move on.
That's what I'm here for, is just reinforce Hayden's preachy idea. No.
As we all know. All right, next question. This comes from James Neeson. Brendan, for a new player, how would you guys suggest going about improving your fundamentals? And then are there any specific heroes you think are better or worse to do that with? I think this is a really big question, and we've talked about some some fundamental tips just before, so we might leave the fundamentals piece. I would say in terms of fundamentals, we talk about this weekly in our podcast, and sort of especially our Level Up podcast. So I think those are some good things to go back to if you're looking for some specific ideas around that. But in terms of maybe a hero that is better for learning fundamentals with, Brendan, any thoughts?
Yeah, I'm a little bit passionate about this one. I lean towards what I don't know what we would call the more complicated heroes, right? So I lean towards Kano being a deck that's going to actually teach you about Flesh and Blood. People will say that doesn't teach you Flesh and Blood; it's so asymmetric and different. But really playing to your outs and utilizing like all amount of information that you have is super important to playing this game. And Kano does that to the maximum extent. And Kano is all about playing both sides of the table. A lot of control decks are too, but I think the biggest trap and the biggest issue I see a lot of newer players that are starting to get better do is they only play one side of the table. They only play their deck. They only play their hand. They don't really perceive very much outside of that. So for me, I think Kano forces you to do something like that. And while Kano is an asymmetric deck and there won't be a lot of transferable skills from hand to hand or card to card what you're playing, the macro level concepts that it's teaching you and forcing you to do to even play that deck at like a basic level, right? To even be competent enough to win a couple games. Like that will overflow to the other heroes. On the other hand, I think heroes like Dorinthia at a base level, right? Dorinthia can get quite complicated. But at a base level, Dorinthia will likely end up not teaching you very much at all about the game. Especially if you're playing like Blitz and you're kind of just jamming up, your reactions and just trying to blow people out. So there are some decks that I am like not a fan of. Main one would be Dorinthia. I think that, you can play a year on Dorinthia and end up coming out of that year just being a very novice player. Where as on Kano, it's pretty much impossible because if you don't achieve any kind of proficiency of Flesh and Blood, you'll just lose literally every single game with Kano.
I kind of agree and disagree because you can just end up losing a bunch of games and not learn anything. I think it's more of a mentality and mindset thing, regardless of the deck you play. To your point, you talk about playing both sides of the table. That is a huge one. If you come into the game actively trying to learn and thinking about these key fundamentals, then you will learn no matter what deck you're on because you'll also learn things from what's happening on the other side of the table. So even if you're playing, a Dorinthia or whatever, I actually think in that regard, I would, I think decks like an Ira and Blitz or maybe a Rhinar or a Katsu Aggro and Class Constructed are great decks to play because there's definitely some line decisions to play. The games will go for at least the mid game, and you have some things to think about and lines to play, and have to think about damage and pitching your decks. But also they're not overly complicated, so that you can still think about just key fundamentals. So I'm kind of on an opposite train where I think it's somewhere in the middle, and I think that almost any deck can teach you as long as you are focusing on the fundamentals. And those fundamentals that are important will change depending on the deck. To your point about Kano, I guess the reason that one of the key reasons you think it's so important is because you do have to play both sides of the table, whereas other decks you can get away with not doing it. But at the end of the day, you're not really learning anyway if you're not trying to play both sides of the table and you're not following these key fundamentals. So I think it's more of a mindset thing.
Mm-hmm. For sure.
Just to disagree with you there, Brennan, just to make a bit of discourse there.
That's the thing. It's 2021, but it's still okay to disagree, contrary to popular belief.
All right, Brent, any questions you wanted to... Actually, just one more I wanted to talk about from, I guess, a new player development side, just because I do think it is a good question. This comes from Caleb J, who says, I just started getting into Fab recently, and I love the show. Well, thank you. That's not the reason I read this question, though. COVID has made it harder to get into, as I don't feel safe going to larger gatherings to play yet. How would you suggest a new player get their first games in while they're still going through lockdowns? I think there is, I have heard that we do have a number of listeners and viewers of our videos who are really just starting to get into the game. And a great thing, I guess, is if you aren't able to go to local game stores or go to local events, there's still an online presence out there with events happening. So there are still online armories happening. There is communities on Discord and on Facebook who are actively playing online games and looking for other players to play online games. Whether that be webcam or TTS, there is tabletop simulator on Steam, I think it is. There is avenues for doing that. So I think if you aren't able to get out to events, you can still be playing Flesh and Blood, and there's some really great events and some really great people who are helping facilitate that.
Yeah, there is. There's a player in North America, Davis Kingsley, who surely is one of the better players in North America, and didn't play his first in-person event until like a couple weeks ago. Played exclusively online. And to add to that point as well, all of the best players I know that do not live in Australia or New Zealand got their play skill from playing online. So there's a ton of depth. There's a ton of opportunity for events to play in. But yeah, it's a great place to start and also a great place to improve because if you're looking to be super competitive at the game, sometimes playing online is going to be the best way to do it. Not only as online armories, but connecting with other people around the world and jamming games. Because sometimes your local meta, can't really prepare you for the world.
Yep. And there's some really awesome players out there and community members that will be more than happy to help you play your first few games. There's no, these players aren't expecting the best players in the world to rock up and give them games immediately. So there's definitely opportunity to that. I'm going to hand it over to you, Brendan, to take us into the next section.
Yes, there's going to be questions on competitive play. This first one here is from Kai Yang. He says, how do you guys balance your job, rest of fab testing on a daily, fab testing on a daily basis to maintain a healthy mental state? Burnout has always been a concern for competitive events, especially with Hayden in lockdown, experiencing similar problems over here in Singapore.
Yeah.
Hayden, I'll let you take this one first.
Yeah, I actually think, if you don't mind, the next question kind of rolls into this as well, which is from Adam, who says, both of you guys have mentioned that you have careers and that you're both pursuing to a high degree. His question is, what do you guys do for a living, first of all, and how do you balance excelling in careers as well as playing the game at a high level? I think these are very similar questions that kind of roll in together. The first thing, I guess, is how to balance it. So schedule is really important. So both me and Brennan have schedules that we stick to pretty rigidly. Whether that's, for me personally, that also comes with my job. I'm a buyer for a retail company, so generally I travel a lot for work, but I'm not right now due to circumstances in Australia that prevents me from traveling. Basically, we're in lockdown, so I do have a little bit of extra time, which is nice. I do just work from home exclusively right now, but I do have lots of meetings during the day, and obviously I have a lot of work to do, and it's not actually, unfortunately, my job isn't just a sort of a 9 to 5. I do have a lot of international calls and things like that go outside of work hours, and some some times that I do have to do longer days of work. But I do also have a job that is kind of flexible as well, which allows me to record a bit later into the morning and then start work a bit later, or schedule my calls around Brendan's our time zone differences for doing testing and things like that. So sticking to a really rigid schedule is probably important for us to make sure we get this testing in. But we also...
go ahead.
I was just going to say, we also utilize the most out of our time. So whenever we sit down for testing, like, we're really focused in our testing. We do 2 hours a day. We come in, we know what we're going to test, the sort of what we want to get out of it. And then the rest of our testing and things like that just come from discussion during the week with like the team. Anything you want to jump in? I feel like there is.
I mean, it's a little. It really just comes down to what Hayden said. So it's just regiment to the extent to where it just becomes lifestyle, and we stick to that very, very, very hard. And I think that's what's allowed us to be successful. To be honest, managing our careers and testing or trying to become better at the game is generally not too challenging. Because you travel on the weekends for the tournaments. You wake up, you play 2 hours a day. For me, I wake up at 6:50 in the morning, immediately start playing. The thing that does make it hard for us is Arsenal Pass plus career. So like that is that's really where the most of the time comes in for us. Actually, it comes in with the content creation, things like that. But again, it's just regimented scheduling and making the most out of that time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Brendan says that the editing takes a lot of time, right, Brendan?
Yeah, I mean it takes a long. That's why I outsource it to Australia.
yeah, exactly. No, like it is something that, to be honest, probably at the moment I spend more time on what we do with Arsenal Pass than our actual active testing and playing. But that's because I'm not traveling to events right now. I'm not going to these events, so it is a focus. It is something that we're looking to change in the future to, I guess, give us a bit of time back. Kai asked about like burnout and things like that. It is so true. Like that can happen so easily. Like you do have to be really careful and really on top of like your like your sleep and your eating and things like that, because sometimes when we go to test, like we test late at night. For me, we don't finish till midnight. If I have like an early meeting the next morning and I get like 6 hours sleep, like that's a bit shit, to be honest. So I am really like mindful of my schedule in that degree as well, making sure that I don't pull 3 or 4 late nights in a row with early mornings to the point where it's going to start to burn me out. So I'm just really conscious of that. And you know what, Kai, in full solidarity with you in the lockdowns, it is tough. I think the best thing is to just have some things that occupy your time, maybe like playing games with friends, but also trying to do some socializing. I think that's been really important for me as well, is still talk to friends and Do things that feel a little bit more normal, even if they're not normal. Like try and organize a day, or that would reflect almost something like you would do outside, like go to the movies or going on walks. At least you can do. Obviously, you can't go to the movies, but you can do movie day at home or whatever it is.
So I'm gonna keep this super super brisk because it's gonna get really philosophical if I don't. But I find there to be some sort of meditative, like positive effect from like extreme, um, like dedication to a schedule. So if it's flesh and blood, it could literally be anything. Or you set aside these couple hours for like deep work every morning. Just doing that every single morning, no matter what, and not even having the consideration that could possibly be a different reality in the future where that doesn't happen. Um, like I find that to be like very, very positive on my mental state, which is weird. But I'm also kind of weird. Like I think like I just
That's true.
like suffering a little bit more than a normal person. So burnout for me is like something that I like want to face and just like grind through it. I don't know. I'm just kind of a grinder when it comes down to
That's
it.
definitely a mentality. Yeah, look, I think it's like getting very philosophical and deep, but I think everyone's outlook on life is different. So if it doesn't fit in with how you want to have your outlook on life, or it doesn't feel healthy for you, then certain things
Yeah.
like competitive play and burnout are probably something you should avoid to a degree.
If you're a normal person, you should definitely try to have fun and surround yourself with good people.
I have fun
and not annoying Australians.
I'm not Australian.
We're all the same.
All right. Next question, Brendan.
Yeah, so this is from, I think this might be closing in on one of our final ones. So this is from Mercurial2304. So do you think on a competitive level, it is better to play all heroes to a reasonable extent to understand their inner workings, or it is better to play your deck and know every possible line for that archetype instead?
Yeah.
So this is kind of goes back to an older question. So yes, my answer is that it is better to actually play every hero, but it's also to play every hero and know as much as possible all those heroes. So it's time dependent and all this stuff. But I think if you put them together and you assumed infinite time and infinite resources, you're like, would it be better to play every hero, or would it be better to just play one and be really good at that hero? It'd probably be better, objectively better, to be better at everything other than just there's a specialist. Because there's a phrase, right? It's jack of all trades, was it master of none? But the phrase actually goes longer, right? The actual phrase is jack of all trades, master of none is better than a master of one. So it's actually like that's the actual phrase, and I think that's kind of reigns more
I didn't
true.
know that. Interesting. Yeah, look, I'm going to give this question is probably the question I've been asked the most in my time in Flesh and Blood by people is this question: is it better to know all the heroes, or better to just master one, as you say? And my answer is always the same, and it depends, and that's because it depends on what you want to get out of it. If you're just playing every hero because you just want to know what they do, perfect. If you're actively trying to win a competitive level event, it may well be better for you to play just one hero and master it. But it also depends on the time you can commit, the access to cards that you have. There's so many things that come into it. So it is a really difficult question to answer. What I would say, though, is that it is important to know how every hero works in Flesh and Blood and what their game plans are, and whether you learn that from playing them, or whether you are capable of playing both sides of the table and understanding from games that you play and matchups that you play what your opponent's trying to do. Whether it's from talking to friends and they tell you how these game plans and strategies enact, whatever might work for you. But I think it is 100% important that if you want to play Flesh and Blood to a good degree, or to a successful degree, if you do want to go and play callings or nationals or whatever, that you understand what at least the meta heroes do and what their strategies are.
Yep,
Cool.
agree. So take us into our final questions, Hayden.
Cool. Yeah, so the final question, Brennan, comes from our winner of the Cold Foil Anathos. So congratulations to Ryan Aldridge. Ryan, if you could ship us your shipping details, just flick us an email at arsenalpassfab@gmail.com and give us your shipping address. We'll get that out to you. Congratulations on the Cold Foil Anathos. But Ryan's question is, what class do you want to see get some love in the next supplemental set? Brendan, I thought this was a great question to just end on as well, so it ties in nicely as well. So
yeah, 100%. So for me it is, there's sort of a duality here. I personally want Wizard. While I think that Wizard is currently an incredibly powerful class, and I love everything about it, right? I would love to see another Wizard, and I'd love to have more tools in my toolbox. Other than Wizard, I do want to see Ranger. I think that Ranger's, I think the class design is fascinating. Just where it's kind of come up in terms of the meta, its current position, power level, all those things has fallen a bit short for me. So we have confirmed another Ranger. So obviously that's nice, but I'm excited to see that. I think that a new Ranger is awesome, and I think that more development on that class is fantastic. But I am holding my breath and crossing my fingers for a Wizard.
Yep. So
or,
I mean,
or a bard. Sorry, I like a bard would be cool as
if that's
well.
not supplemental, we're going to talk about
I know,
supplemental.
but like, come on, it'd be sick.
It breaks the rules question. Rules of the question. I'm going to say, actually, funnily enough, mechanologist, and there's a big reason for that. I don't want to see more, I guess, love to the traditional mechanologist builds that we've seen so far. I would love to see some cards come out for mechanologists that help to adapt the way that mechanologist is currently played. I mean, obviously, Dash is our data doll, but Dash is our only mechanologist right now, and especially for classic constructed. As much as maybe people want to play data doll and blitz, and good luck to them. I would love to see it be a way that moves away from probably the items to some degree, or at least these plans that basically make it so that playing Dash in a way that gives you the opportunity to play a more controlling plan is always going to be reasonable. I would love to see some cards that restrict that ability, so that just playing a more boost orientated, a more aggressive version of the deck it would just be really beneficial. So maybe something that brings in Plasma Barrel Shot as a weapon that is competitive would be great. So that's what I would love to see from Segment 2, because I love that class and I love that weapon.
Yeah, Hayden just wants more aggro metas in the future.
It's not even like
degenerate.
It's not even like aggro. Like, I would just love to see, because I think that's actually more around like 5-card turns and big setups with something like a Plasma Barrel Shot, because of what that does. But if there was maybe something that allowed you to, like, I don't know, double damage, or it needs to be balanced, obviously, but I think there's some really cool design scope there with that weapon in particular, but also, cards like Maximum Velocity and maybe cards that have boost on them, but also work in different ways to what we've seen so far, with just a boost card that just gives Dominate or just gives extra attack. Or whatever. I actually really like Combustible Courier, and I really like Overblast. I think those are cool cards from Crucible of War. So seeing some of these Crucible of War cards come into their own some way, I think there's just needs a few more cards to be able to do that.
Yeah, I just think you like your long barrels a little too much. You want to keep taking this into an aggro format.
I do like the Plasma Barrel Shot. I would love to see it use some more. Cool. All right.
Awesome.
All right, Brendan. Well, that is our mailbag. We had so many questions, so I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who did submit a question. We definitely didn't get through all of them. Me and Brendan are going to go away and work out how we want to, because we would love to answer these questions. So some of them we might actually come back and directly answer on YouTube, but we might actually roll some of these questions into either Time in the Round or one of our other formats, because there's some really awesome questions here. There's full sections that we didn't even get to touch on, but I just want to say thank you to everyone that submitted a question, and everyone was in the draw for that cold foil Anathos. Thank you again, Ryan. Congratulations. And we do have some of these. We have this kit from LSS, so we're just going to pick a couple of other random winners who submitted a question to receive some extended art foil protections.
Awesome. And now back to the only job that I'm good at, which is shilling us on all of our social media. So we are obviously also on YouTube. So this is our podcast. But we do have YouTube content as well. So if you're interested in deck text, gameplay, or our more free-form kind of sub-podcast, Time in the Round, go check us out on YouTube. We are Arsenal Space Pass. Our YouTube channel has been absolutely exploding recently. It's like literally growing exponentially. We reached 1,000 subscribers last weekend, and we're already climbing up to that 1.5, maybe 2K soon. So that's awesome. So if you're interested in that kind of stuff, go check us out and choose subscription. It helps out a lot and has encouraged us to kind of take the channel to a new level. If you're on Twitter, me and Hayden, the boomers of Fab, have figured out how to use the Twitter. So I am at the Fiddy Shades, so THE Fiddy Shades, FIDDY SHADES, like the softcore erotica novel. And Hayden is at Fjendale, so FYEN_Dale, like Toma Fjendal. So check us out on there, engage with us, love it. I tweet out all kinds of funny stuff. Retweeted the MetaPie, and we got a lot of engagement. I wasn't expecting. I got a ton of engagement on that, and people were dogging on my girl Levia in the comments. But check us out on there, and yeah, we'll be on Twitter, YouTube, and then obviously anywhere you get your podcast.
Yeah.
And lastly, we have just started up our Patreon. So if you want to really dig into the details, finally get that huge edge on your local meta or competing at these Road to National events or even a calling, we're going to have in-depth deck text, deck guides, sideboard guides, everything you need to level up your play to the highest level possible. And it's going to be exclusively on our Patreon, alongside with our YouTube content, which we will continue. So that support will help us out a ton. So if you're interested in any of that, be sure to check it out. We appreciate any support that you would send our way. But with that concludes episode 19 of Arsenal Pass, and we will see you all next week.
See you later.